the jewels that exist within their community, and the need to then encourage all of the good things that can happen in those communities. So we've talked about that. There have been a number of issues that have been raised, including pointing out that during this this pandemic, COVID, it has been an accelerator in many ways. And one way that we talked about in particular is highlighting the disparities in technology based on race. Those who have access to technology, thinking about things like the fact that families now are sending their children back to school virtually, and whether that family has access to broadband, whether that family has access to the knowledge about how technology works, can have everything to do with the capacity of the children of that family to actually survive through this moment, much less thrive. We have talked about the importance of building an entrepreneurial class, meaning having our government, and as our priorities, and it is part of Joe Biden and my priority, investing in entrepreneurship, and investing not only through the work that we will do that is about access to capital through the Small Business Administration, access to capital about putting money into opportunity zones is one part of it, but also $150 billion in new capital and opportunities around investing in private venture capital as well as what the government can do. But that this is about an investment in not only those specific communities, but in our country. Understanding that some of the greatest sources of wealth and intergenerational wealth come about through that kind of focus. We have talked about the importance of community banks. During the course of this crisis, up to 90% of minority and women-owned small businesses did not get the benefit of the PPP. In large part because, unlike how Donald Trump has been concerned about the wealthy, the people who are working every day and trying to raise their families don't have the access to those kinds of relationships and have not received the benefit of something like the PPP. We've talked about the need to make tax credits permanent, and doing that, and through doing that, increasing funding to as much as $5 billion annually to provide credit for equity investment in small businesses that benefit low and moderate income areas. So these are some of the conversations that we've had this afternoon. And it is also in the context of a pledge that Joe Biden and myself are making to small businesses throughout our country, including here in Milwaukee, that we see you, we understand the significance of what you are in terms of the health and well-being of communities, and we see the benefit to the entire country to invest in our small businesses and our small business leaders. And so that is why we are here today, and I couldn't be more thankful for the business leaders who have taken time out of your days. Today, of course, is Labor Day. And so part of the work that we've been doing today is to honor the men and women of labor, including, we talked about this, the pride that Milwaukee and so many of us have in organized labor. The Lieutenant Governor talked about that, and what we must do to always support the working man and woman to be able to engage in collective bargaining and to have all of the wages and benefits that come with a hard day's work and the acknowledgement of the dignity of work. So with that, Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to pass the mic for you to make some statements.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I just want to thank you for being here. I want to remind people that this is the Senator's very first trip, so we are excited to be able to participate in that. I think I speak for everybody in this room as we know how crucial the state of Wisconsin, especially the city of Milwaukee, will be in the upcoming election. It's an important thing for us to have leaders who care, leaders who are going to show up and listen to the concerns, especially with so many black business owners here at the table right now. And you juxtapose that with the White House's recent decision to cancel all trainings related to race. And it's unfortunate that at a time where we have so many disparities here in Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin, all across the country, that Donald Trump won't respond to that crisis within a crisis. So we are very honored, proud and lucky to have Senator and soon to be Vice President Harris with us today. And I will pass it back over to you because I know you want to take some questions before you get out of here. Oh, all right.
We're going to jump out of this for a moment. That was Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. That's also Senator Kamala Harris. She made a campaign stop in Wisconsin today, talking to black business leaders and talking about the ways in which the government and also private financing can help lift up communities if a Biden-Harris ticket were to be elected in November. We're gonna sneak in a very short break, and on the other side, we're going to continue our conversation with Jon Meacham about John Lewis. Stay with us.
Everywhere except work. Why is that? Is it because people love filling out forms? Maybe they like checking with their supervisor to see how much vacation time they have.
What would have happened if the insurance company?
Conversation we were having a moment ago. His book about John Lewis is called His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope. John, sorry about the interruption there. We were talking about how John Lewis would say, if you think that it is bad right now and we can't move forward and come together, I invite you to walk in my shoes. Continue on with that.
All right. Well, he believed fundamentally in the power of love. He believed that for all the forces of division, for all the stumbling blocks that a fallen world put in our way, that if enough of us, if you and I and enough of us actually oriented our hearts and minds in the right direction, toward generosity, not greed, toward selflessness over selfishness, that in fact we could bring about the kingdom of God on earth. I mean, he and I disagree about that. I don't think that's possible on this side of paradise. But I do know this. The example of his life, the fruits of his work, are a nation and a people who, for all of our problems, are in fact better positioned to act as citizens and as stakeholders in this democracy today than we were when he started. So if you doubt the capacity of America to change, look at John Lewis. As you said, he was born in segregation. He didn't see a white person except for the mailman until he was well into his teens. He was, 40 times taken to jail. He went to Parchment in Mississippi, which Faulkner called Destination Doom. It was, as his friends told me, a miracle that he survived. They were surprised he survived. And think about what we're talking about, his surviving. It's state-sanctioned, white supremacist law enforcement, right? I mean, that's what happened at the Pettus Bridge. That's what happened at Selma. Those were troopers and deputized possemen who were trying to enforce an order of apartheid. And so I'm not saying that because things changed in the past, they will change again. And John Lewis would never say that. But what he would say is that his life is witness that if we vote, if we fight for the right to vote, that's the greatest form of nonviolent protest you can imagine. And to connect with what you just showed from Senator Harris, if when we see something wrong, as Congressman Lewis would say, if we see it, we should speak up and speak out and stand up. There is a problem with the capital markets into minority-owned businesses. It's a clinical fact that can be addressed if enough of us understand that, in fact, we are a stronger and better nation when we follow the path of a John Lewis, not the path of a Bull Connor.
Jon Meacham, thank you so much for sticking around with us and for tolerating that brief interruption in our conversation.
That's great.
We're always happy to have you. Congratulations on the #1 debut for the new book, His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope. Jon Meacham, thank you for joining us. And that is going to do it for me today. Happy Labor Day to all of you out there, especially those of you who are laboring on this Labor Day. MSNBC's continuing coverage picks up with my colleague, Steve Kornacki, right now.
Good evening. I'm Steve Kornacki at MSNBC headquarters in New York, and we are now 57 days away from the presidential election. Labor Day means there is now a full court press underway from both campaigns. All four nominees, two for president, two for vice president, were out in full messaging mode today. The president speaking from the White House, Joe Biden in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, and the vice presidential candidates, each of them in the critical state of Wisconsin. This afternoon, Trump defended his handling of the coronavirus, continued to talk up the possibility of a coming vaccine, while also attacking Senator Kamala Harris for saying that she wouldn't necessarily trust a vaccine that's been approved by the Trump administration before Election Day.
Under my leadership, we'll produce a vaccine in record time. Biden and his very liberal running mate, the most liberal person in Congress, by the way, is not a competent person, in my opinion, would destroy this country and would destroy this economy, should immediately apologize for the reckless anti-vaccine rhetoric that they are talking right now. Now they see we've done an incredible job, and in speed like nobody's ever seen before. This could have taken 2 or 3 years, and instead it's going to be done in a very short period of time. Could even have it during the month of October, maybe even before a very special date. You know what date I'm talking about.
There are now more than 6.3 million cases in the United States, and more than 190,000 have died. Some experts warn of a possible surge after this Labor Day holiday weekend. Today, Biden again slammed Trump for his response and also weighed in on the issue of vaccines potentially being ready before Election Day.
He has just sort of waved the white flag on dealing with COVID, and all he wants to do is just reopen. I would want to see what the scientists said. I want full transparency on the vaccine. But pray God we have it. If I could get a vaccine tomorrow, I'd do it. If it cost me the election, I'd do it.
The president also spent the weekend vehemently denying reports that he privately called veterans, quote, suckers and losers. This first reported by The Atlantic magazine. The Atlantic also reported that Trump was angry when flags were lowered to half-staff after Senator John McCain's death, and also that he referred to McCain as a, quote, loser. Today, Trump was asked about his denials.
Some people are having a hard time believing your denials of the Atlantic story because of what you said about John McCain in the past.
I don't understand it at all, no, because I've always been on the opposite side of John McCain. John McCain liked wars. I was never a fan of John McCain. Who would say a thing like that? Only an animal would say a thing like that. There's nobody that has more respect for not only our military, but for people that gave their lives in the military.
This campaign is also underway against the backdrop of protests against police use of force and incidents of civil unrest. This weekend brought more demonstrations over police shootings in Louisville, Kentucky, along with Rochester, New York, and Portland, Oregon. Those latter two cities also seeing outbursts of violence and property destruction. The president has pointed to these incidents as he's pressed his campaign message of law and order and blamed Democrats for the ongoing demonstrations.
These are Democrat-run cities all, and there's no retribution. They stand there, they throw things at the people that are supposed to be protecting something, and nothing happens. I was with the governor in Texas. He looked at me and said, I can't imagine how they allow this to happen.
Meanwhile, Kamala Harris met with the family of Jacob Blake during her visit to Wisconsin. She also spoke to him on the phone. Blake was shot in the back by Kenosha police officers responding to a domestic incident 2 weeks ago and is now unable to walk.
They're an incredible family, and what they've endured, and they just do it with such dignity and grace. And, they're carrying the weight of a lot of voices on their shoulders.
Here for our lead-off discussion, Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Anita Kumar, White House correspondent and associate editor for Politico, and Clint Watts, a former FBI special agent and member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Thanks to all of you for being with us. As we enter, I guess we always say Labor Day is the start of the home stretch, 2 months from Election Day. But of course, early voting, mail-in voting, that could begin and is beginning much sooner than that. Peter, let me start with you just to sort of set this stage here for where this race is, we see national polls with the president trailing by about 7 points. We see him down, but a bit closer in the swing states. From the White House's perspective, how do they get from here to victory in November?
Right, that's a great question. And in fact, one of the things you hear from them is that their polls are better than our polls, right? Their polls are better than the public polls, and that they think that they've got some momentum. Public polls aren't showing it. The race is roughly where it was before the two conventions. Vice President Biden has a substantial, though not, overwhelming lead at this point. And the question is, where can Trump go to make sure he locks up that electoral college majority, right? Their theory is that if they can hold on to Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina, then all they have to do is win one of those four Midwestern states, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and they keep Biden out. So the strategy, of course, is to make Biden unacceptable, to make this a choice, not a referendum, to talk about why Trump voters, or at least voters who are sympathetic to Trump, should get out to vote because Biden is too much of a threat to their livelihood, to the safety of the streets, and so forth. Again, whether that's going to work or not, that's what these next 2 months are going to show. I think what's going to be really key are going to be these debates. 3 chances for the two candidates to go up head to head and actually compare them rather than make it a referendum on Trump. That's going to be I think one of the defining moments of these next 60 days or 57 days.
So Anita, Peter notes there the importance that you look at, he says, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those 4 Midwest states right there. So much attention on Wisconsin the last couple of weeks, I should say. The polling right now, we'll show more of this later, but the polling is not budging in Wisconsin. What are you picking up from folks around the president? Are they surprised the numbers are still where they are in Wisconsin? Does it give them any pause about the message that they're playing with here, the strategy they're employing in those states?
Well, there are people that have been convinced for months now, months, that this law and order message for suburban nights, women, is the right message. But they don't think that it may change until these last couple months. They think that, these are the times after the conventions, as we get into post-Labor Day, that it might change. They plan to stick with this message. They think that it can work in some of those states that you mentioned, Minnesota, Wisconsin, places that are heavily white. But the problem is that this might backfire in other states, where more diverse states, where they also need to win. And it's, the polls are showing that they're not doing so well or down. So we're talking about places like Florida, North Carolina, Georgia. So this has always been President Trump's problem, is that he's, sort of reaching out to his base and talking to them. But then he's trying, while his campaign is trying to reach out to other groups, what he's doing is undermining that. So it's a very conflicted message, much like we saw at the Republican convention.
And Clint, again, with each of these campaigns trying to get a message out here, from your standpoint, when you look at how this campaign is going to play out, sort of the mechanics of this campaign over the final 2 months, what variables do you see that have the potential to shape this race?
Honestly, Steve, I don't think there's a whole lot that could be a big game changer. If you look at the message about the military over the last week that's come out from the Atlantic, I don't see any military members. I come from the military. Their impressions of President Trump, I think, really came from how he handled General Mattis and General Kelly, who both became secretaries for him. I think when you look at the political issues that are happening, the law and order message has been established by President Trump. The Russia investigation, what we see from overseas, we'd seen the Ukrainian debacle go down with Rudy Giuliani. It can't even get into the airwaves at this point. And so I'm interested to see what could move the needle at all, what could be a serious game changer. We're always looking for an October surprise, but I just don't know what's left in the cannon for either of these campaigns to make a sizable shift. I know the vaccine is going to be one, but I'm not sure that the public could believe the president 6 months ago and now believe him about the vaccine now.
Peter, let's talk about, too, these comments from the president that the Atlantic reports, they cite unnamed sources. Some other outlets have now said same thing. They've got some high-ranking unnamed sources, too, saying that the president had made these disparaging comments about veterans. What are you picking up, again, in the White House, around the president here, in terms of how they are thinking about the impact of this story?
Well, you can see in the intensity and the ferocity of the response just how dangerous they consider it, right? The military, at least the military larger community that they see as part of their base, has already been sliding away from them. The Military Times poll showing the active duty troops are siding with Biden right now, I think it's 41 to 37. That's a dangerous sign from this president. If this narrative that he belittles them behind the closed doors, if he calls them losers and suckers outside of camera range, becomes the established and accepted narrative among many military members or their families, that's an obvious political, explosive, right, for this president. So that's why he's going out there and trying to diminish it as much as possible, to make sure that there's at least some question in the minds of people that they can say, look, there are all these denials. Why should we believe this? Even though, as you pointed out, I mean, it's as Jeff Mason pointed out in that question, it's so in keeping with what the president himself has said on camera about John McCain, for instance. I mean, just the other day, he said, look, I never called John McCain a loser, but it's on videotape. We see him using that very word on videotape. He used it on Twitter. So I think that, there's a credibility issue. Some people are going to always believe anything the president says. Some people are always going to believe whatever his opponents say. But he's trying to, make sure that the people who are sympathetic to him in the military community do not accept this as a genuine report.
Anita, and obviously we've been talking about it as well. The coronavirus looms here in the home stretch. You have the president there, explicitly saying, hey, maybe before Election Day, there's a positive development here, a breakthrough when it comes to a vaccine. Politically, the way the president is positioning himself here, you can talk a little bit about potential risks there from the president's standpoint. Is he promising something that, if it doesn't come through, could cost him at the polls? And then also the flip side, the response you're seeing from Democrats here, Kamala Harris, president going after her on that. Is there a risk politically for Democrats of being too skeptical, being seen as too skeptical here at all?
Well, I mean, obviously the president needs to have something in these next 2 months. It needs to be something pretty big to change the dynamic. And most of what America is still dealing with is the coronavirus. So it needs to be a vaccine or a significant reduction in infections. This is why you've seen him talk about schools. He's trying to get everyone out there. So he needs something to change in this dynamic. And the vaccine is what he has been focused on, and has been focused on for weeks now. You notice that today he said October, but he had actually said the end of the year, that we would have something by the end of the year. And then he said November. He said October. Today he even mentioned that special day, which we assume was the election that he's referring to. So he very much is pushing this. This is his number one goal for politically speaking for the coronavirus at this point. But yes, you saw Senator Harris, Vice President Biden pushing back on this, saying, how can we believe him? So there is, there's some risks on both sides. The president may not get the vaccine he wants in the next few weeks. If you listen to public health experts, they say it's actually quite unlikely. So is he promising something that he can't deliver? Possibly, probably. You've seen the Democrats saying, he's lied before. He's told he's promised things that just haven't happened, and so we don't trust him this time. So both of these, sides are really looking at this. This, for all the talk about law and order and the military and everything else, most Americans today are still at home dealing with schools and businesses being closed. This is the thing that they want to be resolved. So it's really going to come back to the coronavirus and how much things have to change.
It's not only that, but it's affected people's comfort zones. It's affected almost every perspective about people's lives, not just here in America, but throughout the world. I don't know of too many countries that has went right back to their normal, everyday routine in not fighting this COVID-19 coronavirus. And my opinion has always been, honesty is the best policy. And if you've made a mess out of something pertaining to what Donald Trump has said to not only McCain, but in words of expression towards what he said overseas about our World War I veterans, my opinion would be to go back and clean it up. Back up. Make an apology. Tell the people I was in error in how that I looked at John McCain. I was in error and how that I should look at people that has been either captured, wounded, or even killed for the sacrifices of our liberty of today pertaining to our freedoms. He needs to back it up. Because if he don't back it up, I don't care if they did wind up having some sort of a miracle cure between now and the election. I don't think it's going to be enough to kick off a rebuttal on the damage that has already been created by Donald Trump. In addition to all the other things that he has said that has been disproportionalizing in the degree that most politicians never would have said it. I don't know if the guy just don't speak up. Just don't think in what he's going to say and how it's going to sound before he ever says it. I don't know if he's just, and I'm bad about this myself, towards being a person that works off of emotions. In other words, I can wake up in the morning and not have even not one iota that I'm fixing to go up to Kentucky. And let's say I'm going to go to Paducah, or I'm going to go to Mayfield, or I'm going to go to Grand Rivers and eat at the Patty's restaurant, or I'm going to go do this or do that. A lot of times I work off of emotion. And I know I shouldn't do that, but I actually do that for a reason, and it's to keep my adversary guessing in what I'm actually going to do. Because a lot of times I myself don't even know what I'm going to do. And if I myself don't know what I'm going to do, I know my adversary don't know what I'm going to do. Because if I sit down, write it down, debate it, think about it, then odds are the supernatural dark world is going to know where I'm going, what I'm going to be doing, who I'm going to be doing it with. And in the meantime, my adversary can plan ahead of time towards putting up obstacles that can actually backfire in what my intentions are to begin with. That's the reason why a lot of times whenever I pray in silence. I pray in silence. In other words, I don't want to pray out loud, even though I'm by myself, to the point that my adversary knows what I'm saying and knows what I'm thinking. Because that's one area that I don't believe that he can go into is my deepest, darkest mind. But what if he had the capability of going into my deepest, darkest mind? That means by me working off of emotion sometimes would be to my advantage. That way he wouldn't know where I was going, what I was doing, what I was up to whenever I got there. Because I have seen my adversary again and again and again. And unless you've experienced, unless you're really in tune with the spiritual world, you're going to say, oh, Dennis or Juby, what you're saying is just coincidental, or what you're saying isn't so. There's no way for you to be able to scientifically prove that. You're right. There isn't no way for me to scientifically prove that. It's kind of like proving the color of the wind or the color of the air. I can't prove to you what color the air is or the wind is because most of the time it's invisible. But what we can prove is the events that happen after a major windstorm towards seeing the damage that follows in behind the wind. You may not can see the actual wind because it's invisible, but you can see the consequences because of the wind. So you can't be in denial that the wind has a color. I don't know what color it is. It may be the color of bright green or white or crystal or something. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure the wind has a color. They claim that the sky has a blue content to it because of the blackness of space. I can believe that. I can understand that whenever you get to looking at colored contours. But getting back to what I was saying towards working off of emotion. Donald Trump himself may be doing this. And for someone like myself to do it, it's one thing. You know, it can be embarrassing, but usually it's not embarrassing other than maybe to a small amount of people. A few people that has engaged in watching some of my videos on my YouTube platforms, my work that I put out to the general public. But whenever Donald Trump does it on a national stage, of 40 plus million people instantly that hear what he has to say, and you're talking about people all over the world. It doesn't just become just a little incident, it becomes a big incident. Especially whenever you've got documentation to prove what he has said during the time that he said it. Once more, honesty is the best policy. Once you've been busted with your hand in a cookie jar, if you're going to make things right with the American people, you need to do things similar towards what other presidents has done whenever they got caught, such as Bill Clinton and other presidents that got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. You need to come clean, because honesty is the best policy if you're going to score brownie points with a lot of people, especially the military communities, the military families. Because the military families are very, very sensitive whenever it comes to the brutality that their father and their mother and their uncle and their aunt and their grandfather and their great-grandfather and their great-great-grandfather had to go through. They're very sensitive in these matters. Because a lot of times they're not only lame, but they're dead. And why are they dead? They're dead because they made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom and for our great nation that we have today, towards being the nation of the free world. So if Donald Trump has made a mistake, in which I believe that he has, pertaining to John McCain, I can't believe that he done and said some of the things that he said and done during John McCain's funeral. It was awful. I watched every one of the episodes whenever they was out in Phoenix, Arizona, in the First Baptist Church there, that I was actually a member of. A member of the same church that John McCain was a member of. Senator John McCain. It was the very church that they banded me from in 2012 whenever I come back to Phoenix, Arizona, because of the episode that had happened up in Tucson. I guess a bunch of federal FBI agents or U.S. Marshal agents that went to that particular church, pertaining to those that was in charge of Homeland Security on that particular church, because with it being a soft target, sat down and went through a bunch of stuff pertaining to the rhetoric that had been talked about me about, going all the way back to 1991 up in Wheeling, West Virginia, pertaining to the President of the United States. And because of it, they must have deemed me as some sort of a potential high risk. And whenever I come out to Phoenix, Arizona, on the third time, going to First Baptist Church, there off of Camelback Road, there in Phoenix, Arizona, I was ordered to leave the property. And I was told that if I returned, I would be charged with criminal trespassing. If I contacted them, called them, if I left any messages with them, according to them, I would have some sort of repercussion in regards of harassment. These are all in exchange towards the false information that has been placed out there about my life, beginning with Homeland Security, that decided that they was going to destroy the founder of a ministry here in America, which is not only unprofessional, not only is it unethical, but it's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional because they are not supposed to engage in religious affairs. Separation between church and state. Separation between government and individualism pertaining to what a person believes and what a person talks about pertaining to freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to assembly, etc., etc., etc. I could go on down the whole line. But if Donald Trump has done something that people are holding against Donald Trump, my advice to Donald Trump would be to go in front of the cameras and make it clean. Clean it up. You can call it crawfishing. You can call it whatever you want to call it. To me, I call it being upfront, honest, and trying to make up for the mistakes that an individual have made. Because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody gets angry at times. Everybody says stuff that they really don't mean. Everybody is prone of making a mistake, even public servants. Ministers make mistakes to their congregation. They'll quote something to their congregation out of the Bible, and the next thing you know, one of their members will catch something that they have said, and they'll bring it out and say, look here, you said this about this, and this, according to the information that I got, this actually didn't occur, or it occurred this way and not that way. So then the minister has to get up in front of the congregation and make things right, because somebody's already done that, checked him in what that he or she has said. Well, it not just works that way in the spiritual community, but it also works that way in the political community, especially if you intend on scoring brownie points with the very people that you have offended. Now, one may say, well, now, if he gets up in top of TV and he admits that he said this, then that's admitting to guilt. You can't admit to guilt no more than what the cameras has already documented you towards you saying or doing. That's another part that Donald Trump don't understand. Once more, you need to think about what you're going to say before you ever say it. Because stuff that you say, being a public servant, can come back and haunt you. And the best thing that you can do is try to clean it up after you've said it. Maybe Donald Trump and McCain almost got into a fist fight. Maybe McCain threatened Donald Trump or threatened his family in some sort of way. Maybe there's something a little bit deeper to the feelings that Donald Trump has pertaining to McCain than what Donald Trump is telling the American people about. If that be the case, especially if there's witnesses that can verify it, then Donald Trump needs to come clean in saying whatever it is that occurred, that maybe people will understand the reason why that he feels the way that he felt about John McCain. But whenever you get captured, whenever you get caught, whenever you get busted in a boo-boo, just like Donald Trump being busted with the Ukrainian government, and you don't come clean after being recognized that you got dirt on you, a lot of people hold that just as much against you because you wasn't a good enough person to come clean. And it goes back to the old cliche that a good person can make a mistake, but it takes a better one to admit it that they have made a mistake. And we're all prone of making mistakes. Now, if Donald Trump is dealing with people that can't accept that, towards him being human, and towards him possibly being prone of making a mistake, then obviously Donald Trump is dealing with the wrong people to begin with. It's the same way with me, right here in Northwest Tennessee. If these people around here locally cannot forgive me for some of the things that I have embarked upon, and some of the things that have been misunderstood, if they can't forgive me, then I don't need to deal with those people to begin with, because they're not my true brothers and sisters in the Lord. They're not worthy of the love that comes from the Windmill Ministries. Not from me, but from a ministry. They're not worthy to be associated with that ministry. So if they want to clam up, better up, continue to be ugly, let them walk their walk. Just like Jesus said, do not throw your pearls before the swine. Just like Jesus said, to shake the dust off your feet and move on. Don't let these people affect your life. Go on about whatever that you need to go on about to do. Because obviously these people never was for you to begin with. They never was your true friends. Just like the woman that I married twice and was associated almost as long the second time as I was the first time, which was about a 7-year period, in total 15 years. If she wasn't woman enough to look over some of my imperfections towards us going to a marriage counselor and trying to work out our issues of two loving couple that love each other, then as far as I'm concerned, the love that I had for her was not worthy of her. She was not worthy of that love because she wasn't willing to work out that disagreement that we had in our marriage, and she wanted to immediately throw up her hands and say, well, I want to divorce you because now you've associated yourself back into the same endeavors that we set out and talked about, that if you ever went back to preaching your ideology pertaining to what you believe in, I will flat-footed leave you. And she done just exactly that. She left me on the count that I stood back up for Christ, the Lord Jesus Christ, and the teachings out of the Bible. It's not my fault that people have been taught incorrectly, or it's not my fault that people have been taught towards feeding only off of the milk and not the meat. These are the ministers' faults that did not properly maintain their sheep and properly make adjustments in their knowledge towards teaching their congregation so that they would be prepared for this particular moment in time. It's not my fault. As I have said before, and I'll say again, this ministry did not fail the people. It's the people that failed the ministry because they didn't get in behind the ministry. They didn't get in behind the messenger. They didn't try to support the ministry that supported wide world utopia and peace and no war and love and forgiveness and the things that the Bible teaches. It's not my fault that these people around here didn't want to engage. Once more, you can lead a horse to the water trough, but you can't make them drink. All I can do is do like I'm doing right now, pertaining to Donald Trump. You know, all I can do is make suggestions.
Manufacturers who are in phase 3 trials.
Make suggestions, make recommendations, give my opinion, make gestures like I'm doing right now. But the fact of the matter is, America is in a crisis. America's in a crisis in several different areas, not just the COVID-19, but in several different areas. I think the COVID-19 has helped to bring out a lot of these areas that America was already in crisis in. I think now people are beginning to look at the clarity of just exactly how bad this country actually is. You know, whenever you get to talking about a nation that's 24 trillion something dollars in debt, I mean, they're probably the vast majority of the people, probably 98 to 99% of the people that live in America that consider themselves Americans probably have never thought about any type of national indebtedness that America is embarked upon right now. But now, since all this other stuff has surfaced, we're now taking the time towards looking at this. It's hurt. We're living in a very, very hurtful state. And what we don't want to do is attack each other in trying to figure out and iron out the wrinkles in where we are right now. We need to work aside that. We need to look through the smoke screen of what the devil is trying to do, and we need to say, okay, this has occurred, this has occurred, this has happened, this has happened, this is happening. Now what can we do to change these things? And that's how a society grows. That's how a society evolves. That's how a society moves forward to the next challenging moments that they may be able to tackle or achieve over. Honesty is the best policy, in my book. In Donald Trump's book, it may not be.
Yes, our legal team is in contact with any of the agencies that might have relevant evidence. So you can imagine we've put out requests both for evidence to be preserved and then turned over. Because the Department of Justice, the Wisconsin Department of Justice.
That's why it's so important to help reduce your risk of fracture with
making the same arguments against Biden that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama made about him. You know, look, this stuff is a bunch of, hoodoo. When said, well, if he's elected, everything will crash. Well, if I'm elected, everything's going to win. If anybody knew how to actually run an economy, we wouldn't have the problems that we do, and we ought to be a little circumspect about that. And sometimes Trump gets tangled up in himself in trying to serve short-term and long-term goals. So, for example, when Attorney General Bill Barr starts going after tech companies in a threat to bring antitrust against Google, what happens? People go take their profits out of the stock market, and the market crashes for 2 days. So the things that may be good for the base may be bad for the economy, and it's tough as an incumbent to keep all the balls in the air.
Julie, what about the back and forth today on the state of our U.S. economy? Obviously a critical issue in the election.
Well, you've got two candidates who are running about the economy, on the economy from two very different positions. Trump can't run on the strength of the economy as is because it's not as strong as it was. It's not the economy that he thought he would have at this point in the election season. So he's basically asking voters to trust him. He's asking voters to believe that if they stick with him, that next year will look like last year did. And Joe Biden is saying, hey, well, that economy last year actually didn't look as good for everybody, that we're still living in an economy where the wealthy are benefiting over lower and middle income people. And so, basically each of these candidates needs Americans to believe their version of.
Exactly. Ain't everybody making $22 or $25 or $30 an hour. A lot of people start out right here in the state of Tennessee off the base, the minimum wage base, which is give or take about $8 an hour. And then they move them up to $10 an hour or $12 an hour. And then they might go to $15 an hour. Well, by the time you get through taking out 40% of taxes, plus your wear and tear on your vehicle, you hadn't really making that kind of money. You really don't have enough money to survive off of. That's what's going on with a lot of people right now. They're in the bad category. They're in the poor category. They're in the category of being the next thing to being homeless. And what has brought all this out to the surface is the pandemic, the coronavirus.
This economy, and I think the outcome of the election will certainly prove one of them right on this theory.
As part of how people feel about the economy, there's also the issue of if the people behind me on Capitol Hill could work out a deal with the administration on COVID relief. Take a listen to the back and forth on that.
The president, I believe we should do more stimulus. Where we're really stuck is both on certain policy issues, but more importantly on the top line. The speaker had...
Hear a lot of back talk, hear a lot of gossip. Like they was talking about a while ago, they get tangled up in their own talk. They say one thing and mean another. They mean one thing but say another. I mean, honesty is the best policy.
Refused to sit down and negotiate unless we agree to something like a $2.5 trillion deal in advance.
When we come back, members will be coming back to do committee work this week and to vote on it the following week. We have to make sure the public knows how we can solve this and why the administration is standing in the way of crushing the virus.
So, Byron, what about the state of our economy, and are they going to get a deal that might help folks who are out of work through no fault of their own?
Well, on the deal part, it sure doesn't appear like it. David Spund asked the president about that today. He said, I'm not going to have Pelosi and Schumer to the White House. There's nothing to talk about. And if the deal happens, they're going to have to make a change. On the economy, I think today was important in the campaign because we have heard so much about the riots and about law and order, and today was a day, Labor Day, to talk about jobs. And the president's argument is really pretty simple, and Julie's absolutely right. This is not the same economy that existed at the start of the year, but everybody knows why that is.
My opinion about Labor Day, I'm going to end this to my viewers, is that it gives a certain time frame for everybody to back up and say, you know what have I done this year? What have I accomplished? Not just business people, not just smart people, not just factory owners, not just politicians, but it gives everybody the opportunity to look back at their labors and say, my, oh my, what in the world have I accomplished this year in comparison to last year and the year before and the year before? And, you know, if you're a truck driver, you look back and you say, well, how much money did I get paid for all those loads? And did I drive any more miles this year than I did last year? If you're a construction worker, did I build as many houses this year as I did last year? Or did I frame out as many houses this year that I did last year? If you're an hourly worker, did I get in that overtime this year like I did the year before? And am I going to be able to make the profits this year like I did last year? In other words, Labor Day is a time to look at your labors. And different people has different labors. Just like the labors of the windmill ministry. I have to look at it from a physical, scientific, spiritual, economical standpoint to say, okay, how far along has the windmill ministries gotten today in comparison to where they was this time last year, or the year before last year, the year before the year before. And it's a time to reflect. And of course, we're all working, if you're working for the ministry of Christ, we're all working under the same foundation that come from the original cornerstone, which was Christ. Christ is the church. He is the bedrock of the church. And if you deviate from that, then you're no longer working for the church, but now you're working for yourself. And believe it or not, there are a lot of charitable organizations out there that basically work for themselves. They, regardless whether they're working for the military or working for the hungry or working for people overseas or working for whatever, there's a lot of charitable organizations out there that ain't associated with the church work. A lot of them. So I just wanted to throw that in there to my viewers and let you know where we stand as a ministry today on Labor Day in saying good luck to all of us and shalom.
And the unemployment rate shot up 11 points when coronavirus hit, and now it's fallen down 6 points already, and Trump is trying to say, I'm the guy who can fix this. Biden can't do it. Another hot issue.